Chapter 7. The morning was muted. There were angry dark clouds hanging over the Faroe Islands, so the radio announcer said, and a storm was expected. There was a knock at the door as Hogni listlessly tried to eat. He looked up to see the priest enter the room. You? What are you doing here? The priest laughed. Not my finest greeting, light-bearer. I may be a disciple of Siete, but I drive, have internet access, and can even use phone apps at a push. Hogni blushed. Sorry, it's just that. I know. Everybody forgets that I have to live in this world too. He sat on around the table, greeting both Pietro and Ruth and smiling at Hannes and Ella, then helped himself to the traditional breakfast of Faroese brown bread and some cold meat slices. Hogni, you're going to have to travel to a remote part of the islands to get the artifacts. I have a map, and it will require that you hike. I'll go too, Pietro said. As you wish, but you may not enter the final chamber when you reach your destination. You'll need to speak to the hermit there and convince him to give you the location of the artifacts. Okay, Hogni said. That sounds easier than it probably will be. That's true. He's been on his own for so long, I'm sure you'll find that he's quite mad, and his reasons for letting the weapons go will change depending on what mood you catch him in. He continued eating the cold cuts. You seem to be taking this all very well, priest, Pietro said. Of course, it's potentially the end of our world and everything in it, but there's no need to let it spoil a perfectly good breakfast. We are in a grave situation, and I do have lots of research about the Forgotten to prepare. And yet, he said, pointing to the clouds, that is by no means normal either. So we're all in danger, especially you, Peter and Hogni. Even though your journey will only take a day and a half to get there and a day and a half coming back, hopefully I'll have some answers for you, so we can at least look at the ways of getting the shards back that disappeared. Where are the other priests? Ruth asked. When I saw you, I thought they might be with you. They've gone back to their respective orders to report on what happened here. They will no doubt have much to discuss about how they'll help in combating the Forgotten. After they'd eaten, it didn't take long for Hogni and Pietro to... After they'd eaten, it didn't take long for the two of them to make preparations for the journey. They got out cold weather clothes and waterproofs, torches, gloves, and even a tent which would be worn on a backpack by Pietro. But as the storm outside increased in its fury, it wasn't so much the journey itself as it was the form of transport to get them to their journey's end that was in question. They were told that they were going to have to walk right from the get-go. Hogni immediately asked why. He was told the hermit would appreciate the effort made and might look on them a bit more favourably. And where the hermit was located, they'd only be able to drive from Sandavaya for 10 minutes anyway, before having to pull over and then walk across rough terrain. Besides, the priest said, ironically, it's a great day for a walk. As he said that, the dark clouds revealed their true intent, and lightning streaked across the sky, and it rained. Not the normal type of shower, but big globs of water cascading so fast that the view from the house disappeared as though a curtain had been pulled against it. As always, when the weather in the Faroe Islands turned vicious, they turned on the radio. The weathermen were forecasting a huge storm and that all public transport was to be suspended until further notice, and those with cars were advised not to venture outside unless it was life-threatening. Hogni and Pietro put on their rain suits. Ruth handed them a small backpack containing food and water. Pietro, taking charge, asked the priest how they actually get to the hermit. The priest gave them a hand-traced map and explained that the location of the hermit was on one of the most visible but remote landmarks beside the Faroe Islands. It was Drop Pinnacle, a place in the past where Faroese people used to bury their dead, and some said divorced their wives too. Hogni and Pietro looked at each other. They had a long walk and it wasn't going to be easy in the storm that was pushing in. One thing, Hogni mused, is that at least the rain would mask his identity. He didn't know for certain, but the Faroe Islands was a small place, and everyone on the island would have an opinion on the matter of the succession ceremony. They went to the door and opened it. The door was whipped open from the wind, and it crashed against the side of the house, straining on its hinges. They walked out and turned around, and the priest, standing beside Hannes and Ella, waved. Huckney's mum, Ruth, looked tearful, but she told them to be safe and then ushered the children back into the house, straining but eventually shutting the door, leaving Huckney and Pieter out in the storm. They walked down the side of the mountain on the pavement. The rain had come in quicker than they'd even expected, as the whole area was awash with water, and it was only getting worse. Pieter turned to Huckney to check if he was okay. Hogni couldn't hear what his dad was saying, but the thumbs up made up for the fact that his father's words were snatched out of his mouth and lost in the wind, which was fast becoming a howling gale. He put up his thumb and kept walking. By the time they had gotten down the mountain, a walk that would usually take 15 minutes had taken nearly 40, and already their waterproof clothes were allowing some moisture in, which made it uncomfortable. By the time they had gotten down the mountain, a walk that would usually take 15 minutes had taken nearly 40, and already their waterproof clothes was allowing in some moisture, which made it uncomfortable, being so wrapped up and yet having the irritation of clammy salt water and sweat on the inside. Huckney struggled against the urge to take his hood off. Down by the harbour, in the centre of Sandavire by the church, where the beach and the sea met, the sea lashed against the church, and they had to cross over the road to ensure that they didn't get swept away with the incoming tide. The wind was pushing them into the path of the sea. They were both practically bent double, and were finding it hard just to put one foot in front of the other. Time went on. It had been 2 hours since they had left the house, and though he could turn around and look at back where his home was, he couldn't see it. He turned back around and held onto the back of his father's rain suit. Huckney thought he could hear a keening sound, but as the wind was howling, he thought it may be just a trick of his mind, and he continued walking. 10 minutes later, Huckney thought he could hear the sound again. This time it was closer. He was sure he definitely heard something. This was confirmed as he touched his father's back to get his attention, rather than trying to compete with the wind by shouting, and he felt his dad's back tense up. Huckney heard his dad shout, "I thought I heard something." Huckney gave him a thumbs up. The sound of the hammering rain on the buildings, the cars, the concrete, and his rain suit was horrendous, and that is all that Huckney had heard that time. With the oncoming dark sweeping in, visibility was dropping, and as they couldn't see anything, they pressed on against the driving rain. Huckney and Pieter both stopped. Whatever that noise was, it was much louder, and it was coming from around them. Huckney vaguely heard mirror, and they both stood on guard, taking up the second form of the Vale of Tears, back to back. They couldn't see anything yet, and Huckney was straining so hard concentrating that he could feel a pulse in his temple. He saw multiple shadows peel away from under cars and from the sides of houses lining the streets. He relaxed a little as he recognised the shadow shapes. It was only some cats. The Faroe Island had many cats, completely feral, who were known to attack people who were on their own in the hills, but they never ventured into towns so close to people. Huckney swallowed hard. The cats weren't normal. They seemed larger. As they came in closer, he could see there were 6 of them, and each was as big as his dog Hake. He tapped his fingers against his dad's thighs 6 times. Shouting was going to be useless. Facing the opposite way, his father tapped 8 times against his hip, 14 in total. The cold sweat continued to run down his back. Huckney could hear the sound he now knew to be the cat's cries was getting louder. The cats caught some of the rays given off by the street lamps. They were large and more heavily muscled than normal cats, more resembling jaguars or cheetahs than regular cats. He saw heavy shoulders and huge back legs, and almost saber-toothed canine teeth hanging down dangerously, with jewels sheening them. With each paw padding forward, Huckney wasn't certain if it was a trick of the light, but he was sure he could see sparks when the claws scraped against the concrete. The muscles on the cats rippled as they moved forward, accenting their size. It was as though their muscles had been accelerated, and the fur on their bodies was unable to match the bulk, as they all had ball patches along the bodies where the muscles were so big. The wind was still howling, and the spray from the sea came in sheets, amplifying Hogni and Pieter's tension as their The wind was still howling, and the spray from the sea came in sheets, amplifying Hogni and Pieter's tension as their vision was periodically obscured. The cats closed in and started to mew more loudly. Hogni couldn't be sure, but it looked as though they were surrounding him and his dad, closing off any possibility of them running away. Without warning, the cats pounced. Hogni ducked but was caught a paw on his left shoulder, followed by a sharp pain. He automatically put punches across with his right fist into the meaty side of the lead cat. He felt rather than heard the crunch of his fist against the cat's ribs. The cat was pushed off his horse in the air and slammed into the passenger side window of a parked car. It shuddered under the weight, setting off the car alarm through the jolt. The cat clambered to its feet, shaking its head dizzy. Pieter had two of the cats advance and jump on him at the same time. Kicking at one that jumped at him in mid-height, he caught it in the air with a kick, and it felt skidding, lying slumped by his leg, unmoving. A quick, sharp right punch at the cat that was fully extended in the air, claws searching for his face, levelled it immediately, though its momentum caused it still to barrel into his chest. He was knocked back 2 steps. Concerned, Hogni took a quick look over his shoulder to his dad. "I'm okay," he heard faintly. He smiled. He had known his dad had been the light bearer, but this was the first time ever seeing his dad in some sort of conflict. Hogni couldn't help but feel proud at his dad's sureness. His dad shouted mirror form, which brought Hogni back into focus on the task at hand. He looked and saw that the lead cat, their coursers, were circling them again. He tapped 6 times against his father's leg. His father tapped 6 times against his. There were 12 cats in all. Hogni's shoulder itched where it had been caught. He flexed his fingers. No problem, though it didn't mean no damage. Rain and sweat were making it difficult to see. His vision was unclear, and as he went to wipe his eyes, he missed the lead cat as it darted through his legs, taking them from under him, and he fell forward. Catching his fall with his hands, he rolled twice and heard the sound of claws raking concrete. He executed a partial lift of the tornado. A sweeping kick that lashed out at the cat that attacked him. He caught it in its face and it spun around limp. The momentum of the spinning leg allowed him to move to his feet and face his attackers without them being able to take advantage of the situation. His father turned and saw Hogni go down to the ground and instinctively moved to help him. This allowed him to become exposed to the cat stalking him, who pounced on him en masse on the bigger opponent, forcing him to his knees through the sheer weight of their numbers. Hogni saw his father go down, being dragged and bitten by cats who were shaking their heads violently, trying to tear him apart. Hogni waded into the mass of fur and claws, forgetting about any danger to himself. He threw himself amongst them, his hands and feet moving in blurs, hitting and knocking them away, seeking them to move him off his dad and buy him some time. He heard only the roaring of blood in his ears. Mercifully, he could see his father forcing himself to his feet, hurling his attackers off him as though they were nothing more than normal-sized kittens. Hogni felt himself hit from behind by multiple attackers, and he went down onto the floor. He felt a tearing of his rain suit and the sudden sting of rain as his skin was exposed to the elements. The rain wasn't the only thing to be let in, as he felt the teeth enter his leg. He lashed out with the other leg as hard as he could. Panic and adrenaline afforded him extra strength. He was still kicking whilst trying to get up when he felt 2 hands pick him up. The message got to his brain, and he relaxed as he recognised hands that held him since he was a baby helped lift him to his feet. He looked into the proud, shiny eyes of his father, and they looked around together. The sight of hulking bodies of still and dazed cats stared back at them. There was an air of uncertainty about the cats now. One cat mewled. It rang out sharply. It was picked up by the other cats that were still conscious. Out of the 12 cats, out, out of the 12 cats, 4 lay unmoving, and the others slunk into the night. One stayed, looking at them longer than the rest, eyeballing them, taking in their measure, as though trying to remember their faces. Then it slunk away into the shadows, only the faint scraping of its claws through the wind indicating its passage into the darkness. Hogni turned to his dad and gave him a hug. They both winced. "Are you okay, Lightbearer?" his dad said in his ear as the wind buffeted them both. Hogni started laughing, and that caused his father to laugh too. It completely broke the tension. They had both faced the passing danger and had overcome it together. They looked at the dark road ahead of them, sporadically lit with street lamps, and carried on walking, eventually the darkness, the storm and rain swallowing them.